Joanna Yeates isn't particularly looking forward to the weekend ahead. Although she is looking forward to the 2 days off, she will spend them without her boyfriend. Since they started going out, Joanna and Greg have actually spent every minute together. Now, for the first time, Greg is going home alone to visit his parents for the weekend. Joanna will be staying at their shared apartment by herself. But even though Joanna would have preferred to spend the days off with Greg, she still wants to have a good time. After all, Christmas is just around the corner, and it's high time to spread a little festive cheer. But shortly after Joanna arrives home on Friday evening, neighbors hear screams for help coming from her apartment. And over Christmas, Joanna's face will be printed in all the newspapers in England. Because that weekend, she will become the most searched person in Great Britain. It is December 17th, 2010, a Friday. Joanna Yeates is 25 years old and works as a landscape architect. She was born in Hampshire on April 19th, 1985. In December 2008, Joanna met her boyfriend Greg, who works as an architect. The two fell in love and decided to move in together the following year. When the two were looking for a place to live, the choice quickly fell on Bristol. Greg's company was moving its headquarters there, and Joanna quickly found a new job in Bristol as well. By December 2010, the couple had settled in well in Bristol. Christmas is just around the corner, and for the occasion, Joanna is going to have a drink with a few colleagues after work on December 17th. Joanna will spend the weekend alone in Bristol. Greg left in the afternoon to visit his family in Sheffield for a few days. Joanna starts the weekend at the Ram pub in downtown Bristol. There she is sitting with a few colleagues in the early evening. At the meeting, she still says that she doesn't feel like spending the weekend alone. It's the first time since they moved in together that Joanna will be alone on the weekend. But the 25-year-old wants to make the most of it, passing the time with Christmas shopping and baking. She lives in the district of Clifton and sets off on foot around 8 p.m. She normally needs about 30 minutes for the walk. On the way, she makes a quick stop at Wade Brothers Supermarket to do a little shopping. On the way, she calls her friend Rebecca on her cell phone. The two arrange to spend Christmas Eve together next week. Joanna buys drinks at the bargain booth and then a frozen pizza at a Tesco Express store. She's expected to arrive at her apartment at around 8:45 p.m. She and Greg have been living in the large house in the quiet district of Clifton since October 2010. The house was originally built as a single large dwelling, but the owner has since converted it into 3 separate rental units. Joanna and Greg live together in the basement apartment number 1. Just a few minutes later, at around 8:50 p.m., witnesses from neighboring houses hear screams. They seem to be coming from Joanna's apartment, but no one does anything. As I said, Joanna's boyfriend Greg is not there this weekend. He doesn't come home until Sunday, December 19th. Joanna's trip to the pub was 2 days earlier. Greg assumes that Joanna would be waiting for him in their shared apartment, but the 25-year-old is nowhere to be found. Instead, Greg only encounters their cat, which seems unusually hungry and restless. Apparently, the cat has not been fed or let out for a while. He tries to reach Joanna by every means possible. In vain. Greg also calls Joanna on her cell phone, of course. However, it rings in the apartment. Greg finds it in the pocket of Joanna's jacket, which she has obviously left at home. Her wallet and keys are also still there. Something is very wrong here. Shortly after midnight, he calls 911 to report Joanna Yeates missing. Shortly after Greg's call, the police are on the scene to conduct initial investigations. Joanna's disappearance is immediately taken very seriously. At 4:15 a.m. on the morning of December 20th, two police officers knock on the door of Joanna and Greg's neighbors. A young man named Vincent Tabak and his girlfriend live there. Vincent is 33 years old and comes from the Netherlands. He has been living in England for some time and works there as an engineer. He claims not to know anything about Joanna's disappearance and not to have noticed anything suspicious. Incidentally, his apartment is also searched 3 days later on December 23rd. Vincent is cooperative and does not resist. The investigators cannot find anything in the apartment that could be somehow connected to Joanna's disappearance. Of course, Joanna and Greg's apartment is also searched, but there are no relevant clues there either. That is, there are no signs of forced entry. Whoever is responsible for Joanna's disappearance did not have to gain forced entry to her apartment. However, the investigators confiscate a laptop and a cell phone from Greg to search for digital traces. Greg once again goes to his parents, who live in Hampshire. Understandably, his girlfriend's disappearance is taking a heavy toll on him. On top of that, Christmas is just around the corner. For him, the support of his family is more important than ever. Nevertheless, he is still in contact with the police by phone. Greg and some friends are organizing a website and social media channels to promote the search for Joanna online. The case is also omnipresent in the traditional media around Christmas. Joanna's parents address the public in press conferences and urgently appeal for help in the search for their missing daughter. But it is as if the 25-year-old has vanished off the face of the earth. It is striking that the police find the receipt for her purchase at Tesco Express in Joanna's flat. The receipt shows that she bought a frozen pizza on the evening she went missing. However, there is no frozen pizza in Joanna's flat. There is no pizza in the freezer and no packaging in the rubbish bin. This suggests that Joanna left the apartment after returning home to eat the pizza somewhere else, or that the person who gained access to her apartment and did something to her took the pizza with them. On December 25th, 2010, millions of families in England celebrate Christmas, but not Joanna Yeates' family, because on this day they receive the news they have dreaded for days. Joanna is no longer alive. A walker finds her body on Christmas morning. She's found in Longwood Lane in Fayland, just a few miles from her home in Clifton. The body had been covered by snow in the days before. There are no visible injuries to Joanna's body. Therefore, the police initially suspect that the young woman may have frozen to death. According to the police, there is no evidence of a crime. However, an autopsy quickly reveals a very different cause of death: strangulation. This leaves no doubt. Joanna Yeates has fallen victim to a crime. The autopsy shows that Joanna was killed several days before she was found, probably on the day she disappeared. As absurd as it sounds, the frozen pizza that Joanna bought on the night she disappeared becomes a key piece of evidence in the case. No remains of the pizza are found in Joanna's stomach, so she never ate it. But since the pizza or its packaging is not in her apartment, it stands to reason that her murderer took the pizza and ate it. The police are also looking for the packaging waste from the pizza. But of course, that's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Tesco is one of the largest supermarket chains in England. The store sells hundreds, if not thousands, of its own brand pizzas every day. Hundreds of tons of garbage from Bristol Clifton are searched by hand by investigators for clues. Unfortunately, without success. The reward for information increases to up to £60,000 thanks to donations from private individuals and tabloids. The police investigate in all directions. They even reopen cold cases from the 70s and 90s because the police cannot rule out the possibility that Joanna's murder is part of a previously undiscovered series of murders. The search for Joanna's killer is one of the most extensive investigations ever seen in England. The police evaluate more than 100 hours of surveillance footage from the surrounding streets and conduct hundreds of interviews. In particular, the video footage from the Clifton Suspension Bridge causes a stir for a short time. The Clifton Suspension Bridge is located near Joanna and Greg's apartment and is a central traffic point in the residential area. It is quite possible that the perpetrator crosses this bridge on his way to Joanna and that he can be seen on the recordings. So when the police are able to secure the recordings, Their initial confidence is high. But this is quickly followed by disillusionment. The quality of the video material is so poor that it is almost impossible to see anything on it. The license plates of passing cars are illegible, and only silhouettes of pedestrians can be seen. On December 30th, there is finally an arrest in the Joanna Yeates case. However, a man is arrested who has not appeared in the media at all so far. Christopher Jeffries. He is the landlord of the apartment complex where Joanna Yeates lived. Just like Joanna and Greg, as well as neighbor Vincent Tabak, he lives in the building directly above the missing woman. On the day of Christopher's arrest, Vincent was on the phone with the police again. He had traveled to the Netherlands with his girlfriend to spend the new year there. But he tells a police officer on the phone that he may have information about the new suspect. The police consider Vincent's insight so valuable that a couple of police officers travel from England to Amsterdam to question Vincent there. And from that point on, chaos breaks out in the Joanna Yeates case. When Vincent Tabak is questioned in Amsterdam on December 31st, 2010, he changes his statement. And suddenly the information that Vincent had promised the police does not help the investigation at all. He speaks out against the new suspect. Nevertheless, the suspicion against Christopher Jeffries is not strong enough to keep him in custody. On January 1st, 2011, the landlord is released from custody on bail. However, he remains a prisoner anyway because the media are all over him. The Joanna Yeates case has been in the British headlines every day for 2 weeks. Christopher is the only known suspect, and the media have already passed judgment on him. The tabloids in particular are all over Christopher, following him everywhere he goes. Just because he has been released on bail does not mean that the general public is convinced of his innocence. It does not help that Christopher Jeffries was very unsettled during the interrogations. He told the police, for example, that it was possible that he saw Joanna on December 17th leaving the apartment building with 2 people. But he could also be mistaken. The police are warning women in Bristol not to walk home alone late at night. Not until Joanna Yeates' killer is caught. On January 5th, the police announced that a piece of clothing was missing from Joanna's body. A gray ski stocking. Joanna was wearing the stockings on the day of her disappearance, but only one was found. Investigators cannot rule out the possibility that the perpetrator may have kept the second one as a kind of trophy, or that Joanna was strangled with the second ski stocking. As part of the investigation, the police are searching the sewer near Joanna's apartment. In addition, guests are being questioned at the Ram pub, where Joanna was a patron before her disappearance. But none of this leads to the murderer, and the police are increasingly coming under pressure. At times, there is even talk of taking DNA samples from every single male resident in Bristol in order to perhaps track down the culprit. The case dominates the British media in the first few weeks of 2011, especially when new information comes to light on January 10, 2011. A letter was received at the pub Joanna visited before her disappearance. The envelope contained the label of a pizza box. The letter was received at the pub on December 27th, 2 days after Joanna's body was found. The exact contents of the letter are not known. However, Joanna's name is mentioned in the letter. The letter is handwritten. Enclosed are an address and a telephone number. Both the address and the number turn out to be fakes. It is a tasteless joke and not the pizza box we are looking for, because the label from the letter belongs to a pizza from the supermarket Sainsbury's own brand. As more and more details of the case came to light and the witch hunt against landlord Christopher Jeffries continued, the police were left groping in the dark for weeks. Until, more than a month after Joanna's death, there is finally another arrest. On January 20th, Vincent Tabak was arrested. He is accused of murdering his neighbor, Joanna Yeates. He was convicted on the basis of DNA evidence. According to this, his DNA was found on Joanna's body. Nevertheless, He was not arrested until 3 weeks after the body was found, and after the police had initially ruled him out as a suspect. Among other things, because Vincent was extremely cooperative, and not least because he had initially incriminated the landlord, Christopher Jeffries, quite severely. Vincent Tabak grew up not far from Eindhoven in the Netherlands. He is said to have been very introverted during his childhood and youth, but also quite clever. So no one was surprised when Vincent went on to study architecture after graduating from school and later completed a doctorate. After graduating, Vincent moved to England because he had found a job in Bath. There, he met his girlfriend, with whom he eventually moved to Bristol, at the apartment on Carnage Street, where he and Joanna Yeates became neighbors. When Joanna and Greg moved in October 2010, Vincent and his girlfriend had already been living in the neighboring apartment for more than a year. Although the two parties live in the same house, Joanna and Vincent, her later murderer, had never met before December 17, 2010. Vincent eventually confessed to the manslaughter of Joanna Yeates. However, he denies that the act was a murder. In Great Britain, the question of whether the crime against Joanna was manslaughter or murder naturally also affects the sentence. And the evidence that the police can gather against the defendant is pretty damning. After Joanna's death, Vincent entered relevant terms into the Google search engine. These included sexual offense explained and definition of sexual assault, definition of sexual behavior. How does forensic identification and decomposition of the body work? He also looks up the range of sentences for murder and manslaughter and other well-known criminal cases in England. But that's not all. He also looked at maps of the area around Longwood Lane, where Joanna's body was found. He also looked at the locations of security cameras on the street where he and the victim lived. However, not only these searches are found on Vincent's laptop, but also much more explicit material. For example, videos of women being strangled. The women in the videos are blonde, just like Joanna. And that's not all. The laptop also contains 145 images of child pornography. Vincent denies in court that the killing of Joanna was sexually motivated. He claims that Joanna invited him to her apartment on the evening of December 17th to have a drink with her. They became closer, he says. After Vincent tried to kiss Joanna, she started screaming. Vincent wanted to silence her and accidentally strangled her. But the court disagrees. The verdict explicitly mentions the perpetrator's sexual motivation. The autopsy report shows that Joanna had more than 40 different injuries, including a broken nose and numerous wounds and bruises. So there can be no question of an accidental killing as Vincent has portrayed it. Vincent Tabak is not convicted of manslaughter, but of murder. He is therefore given a life sentence, of which he must serve at least 20 years. In addition, he was sentenced to 10 months for possession of child pornography images. Not only was Joanna Yeates' family severely traumatized by the murder of the 25-year-old, but throughout Bristol at the turn of the year 2011, there was widespread fear of a murderer on the loose. Christopher Jeffries, the landlord of Vincent and Joanna, also suffers from the consequences of the case to this day. Because while he was mistakenly arrested for Joanna's murder, his photo had already been printed in newspapers across the UK. Everyone knew his name and face, in the context of the murder of 25-year-old Joanna. The media hunt for him was so intense that his image is still associated with the murder of Joanna Yeates to this day. And he was arrested mainly because of Vincent Tabak, who was only trying to divert attention from himself. And that brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of today's case? Are you interested in cases from around the world? Please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, there's not much more to say. Thank you for watching and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, bye guys.